The sun hung mercilessly in the midday sky, casting its blistering heat over the cracked, dusty ground of a forgotten lot on the outskirts of a small Texas town. The cicadas screamed, the air wavered like liquid, and not a single tree offered real shade, except for one aging mesquite, standing alone like a witness to something unspeakable. Beneath it, three German Shepherd puppies were tied to the trunk with frayed rope, their tiny bodies trembling under the weight of abandonment. They were barely 6 weeks old, too young to understand betrayal, but old enough to feel fear. One had a dark coat and large, floppy ears that hadn't yet learned to stand. He let out a panicked yelp, startling his two siblings, a sandy brown pup and a smaller one with a snowy white patch on her chest. Their cries were soft, but desperate. The ropes dug into their necks every time they moved, confused and searching for the mother who had vanished hours ago. Across the road, behind a yellowed curtain, an elderly woman stood frozen, watching. She had seen everything. A battered old pickup had pulled up earlier in the day. The driver, an old man with tired eyes, got out without a word, walked to the tree with mechanical coldness, tied the puppies as if discarding trash, and left. No goodbye, no hesitation. Just a quick wipe of sweat from his brow before driving off, his tires spinning dust into the unforgiving heat. The woman had tried calling animal control. No one answered. Deep down, she knew no one would come. Not in a place like this, not for three unwanted pups. Time passed. Cars drove by. A few slowed. One or two drivers glanced over, shook their heads, and drove on. No one stopped. The sun climbed higher. The puppies grew weaker. Their cries faded into the heat, unanswered. Until a man in worn boots appeared on the horizon. A soldier home from war, carrying invisible wounds. And everything began to change. Martin Alvarez had only been home for 12 days. After 8 years of service and 2 brutal deployments overseas, the quiet of civilian life felt deafening. The town he grew up in hadn't changed much. Same cracked sidewalks, same leaning mailboxes. But Martin had. There was a hollowness in him now, a weight he couldn't shake, as if part of him had been left behind in the desert sands of a foreign war zone. He came back, not to start over, but to settle his late father's affairs, maybe clean out the old garage, maybe figure out how to breathe again. That afternoon, he walked the dirt road behind the house, his boots kicking up clouds of dry dust that clung to his jeans. He hadn't meant to go far, just far enough to clear his head, to get away from the stillness of an empty house filled with his father's ghost. The sun beat down hard, pressing against his back like a burden he couldn't put down. Sweat trickled down his spine. The silence once comforting now gnawed at his nerves. Then he heard it. At first it was faint, so faint he thought it might be in his head, just another echo from a memory that refused to stay buried. But there it was again, a yelp. Weak, broken, real. Martin stopped cold, his instincts honed over years in combat kicked in. He scanned the field, eyes narrowing, heart beginning to pound. He followed the sound, past a leaning fence, through a patch of scorched weeds. And that's when he saw them. 3 puppies, tied to a tree, panting, barely moving. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The sight hit him like shrapnel to the chest. He rushed forward, dropped to his knees, and the stench of heat, filth, and something far worse, despair, hit him full in the face. One pup lay curled up, unmoving. Another flinched at his shadow. But the third, the dark one, locked eyes with him and let out a hoarse, defiant growl. Martin's heart cracked wide open. "Easy, boy," he whispered, reaching slowly for the pocket knife at his hip. "I'm not here to hurt you." And in that moment, sweat dripping, pulse racing, breath catching, Martin Alvarez, war-hardened soldier, realized he wasn't just rescuing them. They were rescuing him. Martin's hands trembled slightly as he cut through the last rope, freeing the smallest puppy, the one with the white crescent patch on her chest. Her body was feather-light, limp, barely more than skin and bone beneath a fragile coat. He cradled her gently, as if afraid she might shatter in his arms. The other 2 collapsed beside her, exhausted but breathing. Their tongues lolled from thirst, their eyes dull with pain. Martin knelt there in the dust, sweat dripping from his brow, heart hammering in his chest, wondering how anyone could be so cruel. He uncapped his canteen and poured a small puddle of water into his cupped hand. The dark-coated pup sniffed it first, then licked cautiously, followed by the brown one, and finally the little white-patched girl. They drank desperately, like they hadn't tasted water in days. and maybe they hadn't. Martin looked around. No houses nearby, no food, no shelter. Whoever did this hadn't just walked away. They'd sentenced these puppies to die. A slow burn of anger rose in his chest. He'd seen acts of war, of violence, of chaos. But there was something deeply wrong about this kind of quiet cruelty. No battlefield, no enemy, just indifference. He gathered all 3 pups into his arms. They didn't resist. They simply nestled against him, too tired to fear anymore. As he stood up, the smallest one let her head rest on his wrist, a tiny, unconscious gesture of trust. That moment stayed with him. It dug into a place inside him he thought had long since gone numb. "You're coming with me," Martin whispered, his voice low and hoarse. "I've seen too much to walk away from this." With slow, steady steps, he carried them back toward his truck, unaware that the decision he made on that blistering afternoon would change everything. It wasn't just an act of rescue. It was the beginning of something bigger, something neither he nor the puppies could have seen coming. That walk back to his father's old house wasn't just a journey of miles, but a step toward healing, for them, and for a soldier who'd forgotten what it felt like to care again. The old garage still smelled like motor oil, sawdust, and memories too heavy to name. Martin cleared out a corner, laid down 2 weathered sleeping bags, and gently placed the puppies inside. They curled into one another instinctively, 3 fragile bodies stitched together by trauma and survival. The smallest one, with the white patch on her chest, whimpered softly as he moved. Every sudden shift made her flinch, as though she expected pain to follow touch. Martin opened a can of dog food, scooped a bit with his fingers, and brought it to her mouth. At first, she recoiled, her eyes wide with distrust. But then, hunger overpowered fear. Her tiny tongue touched his hand, tentative at first, then with more urgency. The other 2 followed. The brown one devoured the food without hesitation, while the dark-coated pup ate in silence, never breaking eye contact with Martin, as if studying him, gauging him. He watched them closely, and something unsettling stirred in his chest. These weren't just any strays. Their structure, their alertness, the way they moved, it all felt too deliberate, too refined. Martin had seen working dogs overseas, trained canines bred for police and military service. These pups carried the same posture, the same quiet intensity. Later that night, the little white-patched one began to cry again, a thin, aching sound that pierced the stillness. Martin stirred from where he sat against the wall, his body stiff from the floor but his mind sharper than ever. He scooped her up, wrapped her in the soft fabric of his hoodie, and pressed her close to his chest. "You're safe now," he whispered. "I promise." She calmed almost instantly, her trembling fading, her breathing slowing. For the first time in months, Martin felt something inside him loosen. The ache he carried, not from injury but from grief, shifted. He didn't know their names yet, didn't know their past, but something in him already understood. These puppies weren't meant to be discarded. They weren't weak. They were survivors. And maybe, just maybe, they had been placed in his path for a reason. One that neither he nor they had figured out yet. But they would. Together. It was just after dawn, the kind of quiet morning where even the wind seemed hesitant. Martin stood on the porch with a mug of black coffee, watching the puppies explore the yard. Luna, the timid one with the white patch, stayed close to the steps. Rusty, the brown goofball, tumbled over his own feet, chasing a falling leaf. Blitz, the dark-coated one, sat alert beneath a tree, scanning the horizon like a sentry on duty. Martin had just started hammering together a makeshift enclosure using scrap wood when he noticed a dust trail creeping up the dirt road. A black sedan, not local, not familiar, rolled to a stop just beyond his driveway. Its windows were tinted, its engine idle. Something about it made Martin's shoulders tense. The front window rolled down. A man in his 60s leaned out, sharp-eyed, with a brimmed hat casting shadow across his face. He didn't smile. "You Alvarez?" he asked. Martin set down his hammer, coffee still in hand. "Who's asking?" "Name's Griggs. I'm looking for some dogs. 3 pups, German shepherds, valuable litter." Martin's jaw tightened. Blitz, as if sensing the shift in energy, stepped forward from the yard, standing just at the edge of the porch. His posture was still, ears up, eyes locked on the stranger. Griggs nodded toward the pup. "That one's got drive. He's not just any dog, is he?" "They're rescues," Martin replied coolly. "Found abandoned. Nothing more." Griggs didn't blink. I was supposed to pick them up from a breeder named Connor Slate, but when I got there, Slate said they were already gone. Said they'd gone to a better home. Seems that's here." The name hit like a slap. Martin had seen it, on old envelopes in his father's desk, on shipping labels buried beneath dust. His father had ties to breeders. He just never paid attention. Until now. Griggs leaned in, voice lower. They weren't dumped, Alvarez. They were hidden. That old man didn't want them found. Martin stepped off the porch slowly, now standing between Griggs and the dogs. If that old man tied them to a tree and walked away, he doesn't deserve to own a houseplant, let alone a canine litter. A beat passed. Then, surprisingly, Griggs smiled. Barely. "They got lucky," he muttered. Without another word, he rolled up the window and drove off, kicking up dust in his wake. Martin stood there, the heart pounding, not from fear, but from something darker. The dogs weren't just abandoned, they were being hunted. That night, Martin didn't sleep. He sat near the window with the shotgun resting beside him, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the porch. The house was still, but his mind wasn't. The visit from Griggs had unsettled him, not just because of the questions, but because of what wasn't said. Someone had come looking for the pups, not as strays, not out of concern, but because they were worth something. And now, whoever they were, they knew exactly where to find them. The pups slept in their crate, blissfully unaware. Luna curled into a tight ball. Rusty snored softly on his back, and Blitz lay closest to the door, his ears twitching at every creak in the wood. Martin's thoughts churned. Why had the breeder, Connor Slate, chosen to discard them? Why not return them to the program or rehome them properly? And why did Blitz, so young, carry himself like a trained soldier? His instincts, his posture, his focus, it all pointed to something more than just breeding. It was legacy, and someone was trying to erase it. Suddenly a sound, a soft thud, then another. Martin stiffened. He reached for the shotgun and moved silently to the window. A figure was near the shed, hooded, crouching, flashlight in hand. They weren't just passing by, they were searching. Without hesitation, Martin stepped onto the porch, moving with the quiet precision of a man who'd once cleared rooms in hostile villages. The gravel crunched beneath his boots. "Hey!" he barked into the night. The figure froze, then bolted toward the tree line. Martin didn't fire. But Blitz didn't hesitate. Like a streak of black lightning, the pup tore across the yard, barking with a deep, commanding tone no 6-week-old dog should have had. He moved faster than Martin expected, cutting off the intruder's escape. The man stumbled, tripped, and scrambled back, nearly falling as he dove into his car and sped off into the darkness. Martin rushed forward, scooping Blitz into his arms. The pup was breathing hard but steady, eyes still sharp, heart thudding against Martin's chest. "You just held the perimeter," Martin whispered, stunned. "You weren't scared, you were protecting." And in that moment, he knew. This wasn't just a puppy. This was a soldier. The morning after the break-in, Martin knew it was no longer just about protecting a few vulnerable pups. It was about uncovering something deeper, something rotten beneath the surface. With a steady hand and a soldier's discipline, he began combing through his late father's locked drawers in the study, seeking answers. And buried beneath old receipts and faded photographs, he found it. A file stamped with the name K9 Elite Tactical Training Program, along with breeding charts, contracts, and photos of dogs that looked eerily like Blitz. One image stopped him cold. A proud German Shepherd, strong, alert, noble, sire Maximus. Status, deceased in service, KIA Syria. Blitz wasn't just a well-bred pup, he was a legacy, the son of a war hero. But then Martin's eyes landed on a handwritten note at the bottom of one page. Batch 099A, rejected, litter unstable, destroy by end of week. His breath caught in his throat. Destroyed. These pups weren't just neglected, they were meant to be erased. Fueled by equal parts fury and resolve, Martin gathered the entire file, every photo, every damning document, and drove straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Boone, a man who had known Martin since boyhood, listened without interruption. Martin laid out everything. The puppy's condition, Griggs's visit, the break-in, the bloodline tied to Maximus, and now the evidence of a planned cover-up. Boone leaned back in his chair, lips pressed tight. "You're not wrong about the program," he finally said. "They've had incidents, and they don't like those getting out." By the end of the week, the truth unraveled fast. Boone launched a quiet but thorough investigation. Witnesses came forward, records were pulled, and when the sheriff's office knocked on Connor Slate's door, he didn't have time to hide the rest. Charges were filed. The program's internal documents were leaked. The public backlash was immediate. The story made local news. Elite canine breeding program exposed for animal cruelty and cover-up. Justice was finally being served. Back home, Martin watched the pups play in the yard, Rusty chasing butterflies, Luna curled in the sun, and Blitz standing guard at the fence line. The weight in his chest lifted, just slightly. They had survived. And now, because he had stood up, so would the truth. Weeks passed, but the echoes of what had happened still lingered in Martin's bones. The house no longer felt hollow. It pulsed with life, filled with the clumsy sounds of paws on hardwood and the soft, sleepy sighs of 3 puppies who were never meant to live, let alone thrive. But thrive they did. Rusty, once weak and underfed, had filled out, his clumsy steps now playful bounds. Luna, who once cowered at every movement, now followed Martin like a shadow, her tail wagging shyly whenever he looked her way. And Blitz, always watchful, always ready, remained Martin's quiet guardian. Martin had promised himself that once they were safe and strong, he'd find them homes, the right homes. Not just anyone would do. These dogs had known fear, abandonment, and the edge of death. They deserved more than a warm bed. They deserved purpose. The first to leave was Rusty. A friend from town had introduced Martin to a single mother raising a boy on the autism spectrum. The moment the child met Rusty, something clicked. Rusty sat calmly, tail thumping, while the boy reached out. No fear, no hesitation. It wasn't just companionship, it was connection. Rusty was meant to be there. Next was Luna. A retired military widow named June had seen the news story and reached out. She hadn't smiled in years, she admitted quietly over tea. But when Luna climbed into her lap and laid her head gently on the woman's chest, Martin saw something soften in her eyes. Luna had found her home too. And Blitz, well, Blitz never left. He remained at Martin's side, every step, every breath. Together, they trained. Nothing formal at first, just routines that became instinct. Blitz responded with a discipline that couldn't be taught, only inherited. Martin had once thought his days of duty were over. But Blitz gave him a new mission. Now they visit schools, speak at veteran centers, walk through local shelters. They don't tell a story of tragedy. They tell a story of survival, of second chances, of 3 dogs who were thrown away and the man who refused to let them go. When Martin looks at Blitz now, he doesn't see a rescued pup. He sees redemption, and this time it barked. This story isn't just about 3 puppies left to die or a soldier who happened to pass by. It's about what happens when someone decides not to look away, when compassion outweighs convenience, when the value of life, no matter how small or voiceless, is recognized and protected. Martin didn't set out to become a savior. He was a man carrying his own scars, seeking peace in the quiet corners of a town he once called home. But in saving those puppies, he found something deeper: purpose, healing, and the realization that sometimes the smallest lives can carry the greatest meaning. Blitz, Luna, and Rusty weren't rejects. They were never broken. They were simply waiting for someone to believe they were worth saving. And that belief changed everything. This story is a reminder to all of us that animals are not disposable. They feel pain, fear, and love just like we do. Their loyalty is unmatched. Their forgiveness, endless. All they ask for in return is kindness, protection, and a chance to live without fear. So let this story be more than just a tale of rescue. Let it be a call to action. Look around, speak up, support your local shelters. Stop when you see an animal in distress. Teach your children that every creature, big or small, has worth, because sometimes the ones we save end up saving us right back. And in a world that often moves too fast, taking a moment to show kindness might just be the most powerful thing we can do, for them and for ourselves. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next episode, each one filled with even more powerful emotional stories of hope, courage, and second chances. We'd also love to hear from you. Leave a comment below to share your thoughts, feelings, or personal experiences with animal rescue. Your voice matters, and it helps us build a community that truly cares.